Reborn, alone on my wedding night. I put up a notice in the capital, "Thanks for warming my husband's bed, sis. I'm out." Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. The dragon and phoenix wedding candle emitted a crisp crackle as the scorching wax dripped down in winding streams, splashing onto the Wonwali wood table. I suddenly opened my eyes, only to find my vision obscured by a suffocating crimson haze. The heavy phoenix crown pressed down on the top of my head, causing my scalp to tighten in waves. The familiar scent of mimosa lingered at the tip of my nose, and the howling night wind whistled past my ears from outside the window. "Miss Banksia," the senior maidservant who had accompanied you as part of your dowry, lowered her voice, her tone filled with concern and resentment. "The master has just sent word that the First Lady of the East Wing has suddenly suffered a heart attack. Since our eldest sister-in-law is like a mother to us, the master says he's worried and must go to her bedside to tend to her. He asks that you rest for now and not feel neglected." I yanked off the red veil from my head, which was embroidered with a pair of mandarin ducks playing in the water. The jewels and pearls on my head swayed, emitting a cold, crisp tinkling sound. I looked around the bridal chamber, which was covered with bright red double happiness symbols, the crimson brocade quilt, the wedding cups of wine, and Panxia's young face, which had not yet been beaten to a pulp while protecting me. Overwhelming ecstasy and searing hatred collided violently within my chest. I had truly returned, back to the night I married into the Liang family, back to that utterly absurd wedding night. At that moment, it had been no more than half an incense stick's worth of time since Liang Shiyuan left the new house. The first lady he mentioned, who had suddenly suffered a heart attack, was none other than the widow of his late brother, his own sister-in-law, Ya Yulian. In my past life, I was foolish enough to believe that nonsense. Out of consideration for his respect for his older brother and sister-in-law, I not only endured the humiliation of spending my wedding night alone, but later even handed over the 10 li dowry with both hands to help him cover the Liang family's financial shortfall. I even adopted Ya Yulian's son and raised him with great care. Yet all I received in return was, 20 years later, the sight of them standing side by side at my deathbed, sending me on my way with a bowl of ginseng soup laced with slow-acting poison. As I lay dying, I heard them mock me with my own ears, saying I was nothing more than a stepping stone sent by the Marquis of Zhenyuan's household, and that the so-called orphan of my deceased elder brother, whom I had adopted, was in fact a bastard born of their secret affair. In this life, I, Xue Lingwei, will never again be a lamb led to the slaughter. Banksia, burn the veil. I stood up and coldly tossed the red silk, a symbol of humiliation, into the brazier. Banksia was startled and widened her eyes. "Miss, that's your wedding veil, it's bad luck. If you're upset, go back to your parents' home tomorrow and tell the Marquis." "I can't wait until tomorrow." I turned and walked over to the dressing table, deftly removing several heavy golden hairpins and leaving only a single step-shaking hairpin to hold my long hair in place. In a deep voice, I said, "Go fetch Lei Yuan. Tell him to bring 2 guards who are discreet and light on their feet, and come with me to the east courtyard. I want to see for myself just how serious my elder sister-in-law's illness really is, that it requires the groom to rush over in the middle of the night to treat her." Although Banksia was taken aback, as a lifelong contract maid trained by the Marquis's household, who had always put her master's interests first, she immediately turned pale and agreed. In the blink of an eye, Lei Yuan, the commander of the Marquis's personal guard, appeared outside the door as if out of thin air. He was a burly man, his eyes and brows exuding the stern, martial aura characteristic of a military retainer. The personal guards accompanying the Zhenyuan Marquis' dowry would only recognize the token issued to me, the eldest legitimate daughter. "What are your orders, my lord?" Lei Yuan bowed his head. "Let's go to the east courtyard. Keep a low profile and avoid the Liang family's servants," I ordered coldly. Tonight at the Liang residence, while the exterior appears decked out with lanterns and decorations, inside it has long since become an empty shell. Liang Shiyuan, a newly crowned third-place winner in the imperial examinations from a humble background, wouldn't even be able to afford this wedding banquet without the dowry I brought to save face. Most of the servants in the mansion were hired on short notice and have no sense of propriety whatsoever. Late at night, when all is quiet, the few elderly maids on night watch have long since gotten drunk in the central hall and are fast asleep. Our group moved as if no one were around, sneaking silently up to the wall of the east courtyard. The east courtyard had once been the home of Liang Shiyuan's late elder brother. At that moment, a dim, flickering light shone through the window panes of the main house, appearing particularly glaring in the still of the night. Lei Yuan gave a subtle gesture, and the two guards immediately spread out to keep watch. With Banksia by my side, I treaded lightly on the bluestone tiles of the veranda and crept silently toward the half-open window. Before he could even get close, a wave of nauseating, breathy moans drifted out through the crack in the window. Erlang. You'd better hurry back. Tonight is your wedding night. How can you abandon the precious daughter of the Marquis of Xue to keep me company, a woman past her prime? If she finds out, our reputations will be ruined, and how will we ever hold our heads up in the capital? That sweet, whiny voice, brimming with endless grievance, belonged none other than Xue Lingwei, the chaste and virtuous woman who publicly claimed to have been a lifelong vegetarian and to have remained secluded and faithful. Immediately afterward, Liang Shiyuan's voice, gentle yet tinged with a hint of urgency, rang out, bearing no resemblance to the clear, aloof demeanor of a scholar he had displayed earlier that day. Lian Yang, you know full well that I married her only for the power and influence of the Marquis's household. Why must you say such things to wound my heart? The reflections of the curtains overlapped. My eldest brother passed away early, leaving you alone and helpless. I swore to protect you for the rest of your life. How could I ever lay a finger on that coarse, brash girl from a military family? That Xue Lingwei is nothing but spoiled and arrogant. She doesn't hold a candle to even a fraction of your charm. Tonight, I belong only to you. Erlang always knows how to sweet-talk me, Xue Lingwei said with a coy laugh, her voice growing even sweeter and more syrupy, tinged with a hint of caution. But will her lavish dowry really be enough to cover the household's debts? The Marquis of Xue is so protective of his own. What if she finds out about us someday? She won't find out, Liang Shiyuan sneered, his tone brimming with calculation and contempt. The daughters of military families are the easiest to fool. As long as I put on an air of nobility and use the filial piety expected of an elder sister-in-law, who is treated like a mother, to pressure her, she'll naturally hand over her dowry willingly to earn a reputation for virtue. Once I've secured a firm foothold in the court with the support of the Marquis's household, won't everything in the Liang household belong to you and me? As for her, I'll just find some excuse about her being childless to divorce her, or have her die of illness. Erlang. You're so mean. Ah. From inside the room came the sickening sound of fabric tearing and the creaking of the bed frame. Banksia, standing beside her, was shaking with rage. She bit her lower lip hard, her eyes bloodshot, and had even drawn the self-defense dagger from her sleeve. Lowering her voice, she was about to rush inside. Those beasts. I'm going in right now to kill them. Stop right there. I grabbed Banksia's wrist, my gaze colder than the night itself. What's the point of storming in now? With just the few people from the Ho family present, this would amount to nothing more than a family scandal involving a case of catching a spouse in the act. Liang Shiyuan is a smooth talker. He could easily turn the tables on me, claiming that I showed no tolerance for my elder sister-in-law from the moment I entered the Liang household. He might even sacrifice Xue Lingwei, drowning her in the pond to settle the matter, all to safeguard his own political career. I want more than just their ruin and disgrace. I want to ensure that the entire Liang family has no place left in the capital, and that they return everything that rightfully belongs to me, with interest. I want to divorce this beast openly and honorably, without a single stain on my reputation. Let's go back to the new place. I turned around, without glancing back at that window even once, and walked steadily back the way we'd come. Back inside the new house, the red veil in the brazier had turned into a pile of cold ashes. Banksia, grind the ink. I walked over to the desk, swept aside the red dates and peanuts, which symbolized the early birth of a son, and pulled a stack of bright red, gold-flecked shin paper from the wedding chest beside it. The paper had originally been set aside for writing thank you notes to guests. Banksia fought back her tears as she deftly poured water and ground ink. I dipped my brush in thick ink and focused my energy on my wrist. Though I, Xue Lingwei, am a woman, I have been by my father's side since childhood. I do not write the delicate, flower-adorned small script characters. Instead, I write in the yin style, with strokes as firm as iron and as graceful as silver hooks. The brushstroke landed on the red paper, its force penetrating through to the other side. Each character was as sharp as a knife. Liangshu Yuan, the newly crowned third-place winner in the imperial examinations, was of noble character. He treated his eldest sister-in-law as a mother, and their bond was deep and loyal. On their wedding night, his eldest sister-in-law, Lady Yao, out of consideration for her young sister-in-law's inexperience and fear that she might not attend to her husband properly, took it upon herself to care for him day and night at his bedside. The deep affection between the uncle and his sister-in-law was so profound it moved heaven and earth. As I wrote this, I let out a cold laugh, dipped my brush once more in thick ink, and wrote the final 2 lines heavily on the paper. As a member of the Xue family of humble standing, I am deeply aware of my own shortcomings and dare not disrupt the moral principles of brothers being friendly and younger brothers being respectful. I now wish to facilitate this extraordinary, once-in-a-lifetime romance between my uncle and his wife by voluntarily agreeing to a divorce. There were no pitiful, heart-wrenching accusations, nor any scathing tirades laced with literary allusions, only the most ruthless, unmasking sarcasm. These few sentences were enough to strip away Liangshu Yuan's self-proclaimed air of nobility and shatter Yulian's facade of chastity into pieces. I wrote more than a dozen of them in a row, and only stopped when my wrist began to ache slightly. Lei Yuan. I looked up at the commander of the guard standing by. Present. Lei Yuan took a step forward. Take this proclamation down and have your men copy out 100 copies of it overnight. I handed him the red paper, its ink still wet, my tone eerily calm. Before dawn, I want to see these notices plastered all over the capital's busiest street, Suzaku Avenue. Post them next to the Imperial Bulletin Board at the entrance to the examination hall, beneath the drum of grievances at the Supreme Court of Justice, and on the walls of every major tea house and tavern in the capital. Act quickly. Once they're posted, take them down immediately. Do not reveal your identity. Lei Yuan took the notice in both hands, his gaze sweeping over the text on the paper, and his pupils suddenly contracted. He had originally thought it was merely an internal power struggle within the inner quarters, but he never expected the newly crowned third-place winner of the imperial examinations to dare commit such a bestial act that defied all human decency, nor did he expect his master to possess such resolve to go down in flames with everyone else. I understand, my lord. I will not fail you. Lei Yuan took a deep breath. His eyes blazed with fervent fighting spirit. Tucking the proclamation into his robe, he turned and strode off into the night. The water clock ticked away, and the long night was drawing to a close. A faint glow was already appearing outside the window. Dawn was about to break in the capital. I sat alone at my dressing table, gazing at my reflection in the bronze mirror, a version of myself stripped of all ornate jewelry, with a clear and piercing gaze. The burning sensation caused by that cup of poisoned wine from my past life still seemed to churn in my throat, but at that moment, my heart was calmer than it had ever been. Under the laws of the Daong dynasty, if a woman took the initiative to seek a divorce, she would face retaliation from her clan, and might even be accused of being overly jealous, unless there was irrefutable evidence of wrongdoing. Since Liangshu Yuan intends to trap me in the inner quarters by manipulating public opinion and invoking the principle of filial piety, I will strike first and, in the most brutal way possible, drag this whole mess out into the open. Miss. Banksia walked over carrying a basin of warm water, her voice tinged with a touch of apprehension. Now that this notice has been posted, it's caused quite a stir throughout the city. Your reputation. Reputation? I dipped my hand into the slightly cool water to wash the ink from my fingertips, my tone indifferent. I'd rather face a city in an uproar than rot away in this filthy quagmire. It's almost dawn. As the bell signaling the morning court session is about to ring, those censors, who usually take the greatest delight in impeaching officials and portraying themselves as paragons of integrity, will no doubt soon lay eyes on this grand gift. As daybreak dawned, the capital was like a pot of hot water doused with boiling oil. It was in a full-blown uproar. On Suzaku Street, early rising street vendors, candidates heading to their imperial examinations, officials on their way to court, and even the street sweepers, all were transfixed by the bright red proclamations that lined the street. On the drum of grievances at the Ministry of Justice and in front of the archway at the Imperial Academy, without exception, were posted the congratulatory messages I had written in my own hand last night. The new third-place winner, an elder sister-in-law as kind as a mother, stepping in to help, the deep bond between uncle and sister-in-law. These words were like poison-tipped blades, tearing apart the Liang family's facade of hypocrisy. Since scholars value integrity and honor above all else, public outrage flared up instantly, and the streets and alleys were filled with pointed fingers, curses, and gasps of shock. Meanwhile, in the inner quarters of the Liang residence, the atmosphere remained one of hangovers and deathly silence, until the steward from the front courtyard stumbled and scrambled his way through the door of the east wing. Bang! The carved wooden door of the new house was violently kicked open. Liang Shuyuan hadn't even combed his top knot. His hair hung in disarray over his shoulders. He was haphazardly clad in a wrinkled long robe and burst in, his face ashen. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared intently at me, seated at the table sipping tea, his chest heaving violently, like a cornered beast. "Xue Lingwei! Have you lost your mind?" He gritted his teeth, his voice trembling with sheer terror and rage. He strode forward, intent on snatching the teacup from my hand. "Those posters outside, did you have them put up? Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're going to ruin the Liang family and destroy my political career." I shifted slightly to the side to avoid his hand, and not a single drop of tea spilled. I lifted my gaze and calmly looked at the face that had caused me to squander my entire life in a past life. Stripped of his polite and refined facade, he was now hypocritical, selfish, and furious, so hideous it made me want to vomit. "The third-place scholar must have been up late last night. How come you're up so early?" I set down my teacup. The porcelain clinked softly against the tabletop. My tone was so impassive it lacked even the slightest inflection. "I am merely grateful to my elder sister-in-law for standing in for me on my wedding night, and for proclaiming this once-in-a-lifetime match to the world on behalf of you and your husband, so that the people of the capital might all share in your joy." "Why are you so angry, my husband? You venomous woman, slandering me out of the blue." Liang Shuyuan pointed at my nose, his finger trembling like a leaf in the wind. He looked around frantically and snapped in a low, harsh voice, "Last night, I merely went to the east courtyard to check on my sister-in-law's condition, yet out of mere jealousy, you've concocted such a shocking lie. As the matriarch of this household, instead of supporting your husband and raising your children, you are consumed by jealousy and defiant to the extreme. For this alone, the Liang family has every right to divorce you." "Divorce me?" I couldn't help but chuckle softly, my gaze gradually turning cold. According to the Daong laws, while the 7 grounds for divorce do include the word jealousy, I've been in this household for less than a day, and my husband hasn't even lifted my veil yet he's already in such a hurry to go to the East Wing to seek medical treatment. If the Ministry of Justice were to take up this case, would it be charged as you abandoning your wife and committing incest, or as me being overly jealous? Why don't we settle this once and for all in open court? Erlang. A high-pitched, plaintive cry, filled with endless sorrow, came from outside the door. Supported by 2 maidservants, Yao Yulian stumbled over the threshold. Today, she had deliberately dressed in a plain white gown. Her face was bare of makeup, and her eyes were red and swollen. She truly looked like a pitiful widow, the very picture of vulnerability. As soon as she walked in the door, she fell to her knees before me with a thud, her slender shoulders heaving violently as she sobbed uncontrollably, "Sister-in-law, every single mistake is my fault. It was because I had a heart attack last night that I asked Erlang to come take a look. If you cannot forgive me, I'll cut off my hair right now and go to a nunnery to become a nun. Even if I were to hang myself from this beam with a foot of white silk, I would never dare to stand in the way of your marital bond. How could you use such filthy, obscene words to slander my virtue out of thin air?" She wept her heart out, as if she'd suffered the greatest injustice. In my past life, I was completely fooled by her delicate, harmless appearance. I truly believed she was a pitiful, well-behaved soul. Seeing this, Xue Lingwei was so heartbroken his eyes nearly popped out of his head. He hurried forward to shield Yao Yulian behind him, glaring at me furiously. "Xue Lingwei, just look at what you've done. An elder sister-in-law is like a mother. She worked herself into a state of illness arranging your wedding, yet instead of being grateful, you actually dare to slander her. Guards! Arrest this deranged, venomous woman and lock her in the firewood shed in the backyard. No one is to let her out without my permission." Outside the door, a few maids who had been hired on short notice exchanged glances, hesitating whether to step forward. "Let's see who dares to lay a finger on her." A furious shout, as thunderous as a great bell, suddenly rang out from outside the courtyard. Immediately afterward, accompanied by a chilling, rhythmic clang of armor grinding against armor, the already flimsy gate to the Liang residence was kicked in two. My father, Xue Jin, the Marquis of Jinyuan, clad in black soft armor with his hand resting on the sword at his waist, strode into the courtyard like a fearsome deity, accompanied by dozens of menacing guards from the Marquis's household. The guards behind him instantly drew their swords. The gleaming blades flashed in the morning light, terrifying the few maidservants so much that they collapsed to the ground, soiling themselves. Seeing my father's familiar, stoic face, I, who had never shed a single tear even as I was tormented to death by poison in my past life, now felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Dad." I stood up, my voice slightly hoarse. My father strode into the room. At a glance, he saw the shattered red bridal veil lying before me and the desolate bridal chamber. Then, as he looked at Xue Lingwei, who was shielding Yao Yulian behind him, his battle-hardened, tiger-like eyes instantly filled with bloodshot redness. "I married my precious daughter off to you, a penniless scholar, because I valued the integrity of a man of letters that you possess." My father suddenly drew his sword halfway from its sheath, the blade pointing straight at Xue Lingwei's throat, veins bulging at his temples. "How dare you abandon my daughter on her wedding night to consort with this shameless widow? If what the public notice says is true, I'll cut you both to pieces right here today, you pair of scoundrels." Xue Lingwei was forced to retreat step by the icy chill emanating from the sword's edge. His face was deathly pale, and his legs were trembling, yet he stubbornly clung to his scholarly dignity, stammering a feeble defense. "Father-in-law, please calm your anger. This is all a misunderstanding." It was Lingwei who mistakenly believed slanderous rumors and fabricated this out of thin air. "My relationship with my sister-in-law is completely above board, heaven and earth are my witnesses. Father-in-law, leading troops to forcibly enter a private residence, if this reaches the censorate, I fear even the Marquis's mansion will not be able to bear the charge of such high-handedness." Yao Yulian also cowered behind Xue Lingwei, covering her face with a handkerchief and weeping so hard she seemed on the verge of losing her breath. "Your Excellency, please understand, as a widow of pure heart and few desires, how could I ever commit such a shameless act? Whether or not this is a fabrication is not for Editor Liang to decide." A cold, deep voice, yet one that exuded the aura of an absolute ruler, suddenly rang out from beyond the courtyard wall. Everyone turned their heads at once. They saw the Ho family's personal guards at the courtyard gate parting like a tide to the sides, clearing a path. A young man dressed in a crimson official robe, with a badge embroidered with the image of a xie on his chest, walked slowly into the courtyard. His features were extremely cold. His brows and eyes seemed veiled by a layer of ice that never melted. His black leather boots stepped upon the blue stone slabs without making a sound, yet the weight of his presence left everyone present breathless. Minister of the Supreme Court, Situ Yao. Situ Yao, the son of the emperor's eldest full sister, holds the supreme authority over criminal justice throughout the realm and is known as the Iron-Faced Yama. In my previous life, I led a reclusive existence and had no connection with this Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, whose reputation resonated throughout the capital. But I knew that not only was he a master at resolving cases, but he also detested the hypocrisy and moral corruption of the bureaucracy above all else. I had Lei Yuan post the notice on the drum of grievances at the Supreme Court, fully expecting that it would catch his attention. When Xue Lingwei recognized the man approaching, his legs suddenly gave way, and he nearly fell to his knees. Although he was the third-place winner in the imperial examinations, in the presence of a powerful court official like Situ Yao, who held such great authority, he was as insignificant as an ant. The This humble official, Liang Shuyuan, greets you, Minister of Works. Liang Shuyuan forced himself to bow, his voice already trembling noticeably. Your Excellency, this is merely a minor misunderstanding and quarrel among the women in my household. How dare I trouble you to take personal interest in such a matter? Siti Yao didn't even glance at him. His deep, icy eyes swept past the crowd and settled on me. His gaze was as tangible as solid matter, filled with scrutiny and inquiry. A moment later, he slowly averted his gaze and looked coldly at Liang Shuyuan, his tone leaving no room for argument. A misunderstanding? A hint of mockery flashed in Siti Yao's eyes. Minister Liang, you likely didn't even know, just moments after your night of passion last night, that by the fifth watch this morning, the censors from the Board of Censors were already kneeling outside Xingtian Gate, holding public notices from the streets and accusing you of abandoning your wife and committing incest, as well as disregarding the principles of human relations. The Emperor was furious and has specifically ordered the Ministry of Justice to conduct a thorough investigation into this case. As soon as those words were spoken, Liang Shuyuan was struck as if by lightning and collapsed completely to the ground. Yao Yulian was so terrified that she stopped crying altogether, her eyes wide with horror. They had originally thought this was merely a private family matter behind closed doors. As long as they refused to admit it and used the weight of clan traditions and filial piety to suppress me, I, as the new bride, would have no choice but to swallow my pride and suffer in silence. They never imagined that this matter would reach the Emperor's ears and become a public case that he personally ordered to be thoroughly investigated. Minister Situ. Liang Shuyuan suddenly lunged forward, clinging desperately to the doorframe, his eyes filled with desperate madness. This is slander. I am innocent. It's Lady Xue. That venomous woman, driven by jealousy, has deliberately fabricated lies to ruin my good name. I will divorce her. I will divorce that venomous woman right now. In his panic, he had spoken without thinking, attempting to distance himself from the situation by suggesting he divorce his wife. Wait a moment. I walked slowly out of the room. Amid the chaos, my voice sounded exceptionally clear and resolute. I approached Siti Yao. Instead of performing the demure curtsy typical of a delicate young woman, I clasped my hands together and bowed deeply with dignity and solemnity. I, Xue Lingwei, daughter of the Marquis of Zhenyuan, hereby accuse my husband, Liang Shuyuan, of violating the bonds of human relationships by having an affair with my widowed sister-in-law. Such conduct shows utter disregard for propriety and the law. He is unfit to be a husband, let alone an official appointed by the imperial court. I looked up and gazed directly into Siti Yao's bottomless eyes, speaking each word with unwavering resolve. This humble maiden refuses to be tainted by such beasts. Today, I ask the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to bear witness. I demand that a case be opened for a thorough investigation, and that my marriage to Liang Shuyuan be dissolved. The early morning breeze swept up the hem of my bright red wedding gown. The courtyard was deathly quiet. Siti Yao gazed at me silently, and a faint flicker of surprise finally crossed his face, which was as chiseled as an ice sculpture. In the Daong dynasty, it was already rare for a woman to take the initiative to seek a divorce. It was unheard of for one to dare, in front of the entire court, to lay bare her husband's family's scandals so thoroughly. Since Miss Xue has filed a public complaint, this case is no longer a family matter. Siti Yao composed his expression, turned to look at Liang Shuyuan, who was slumped on the ground, and spoke in a voice as cold as iron. The Supreme Court of Justice handles cases based solely on evidence. Guards, take Liang Shuyuan and Mrs. Yao back to the Supreme Court of Justice to await trial. Marquis of Zhenyuan, Miss Xue, please accompany this official as well. The officers from the Ministry of Justice pounced like wolves and tigers, quickly subduing Liang Shuyuan, who hadn't yet regained his composure, and Yao Yulian, who was screaming hysterically. As I watched their pitiful state, a cold smile played at the corners of my mouth. In the courtroom of the Ministry of Justice, the atmosphere was so tense you could almost feel the tension hanging in the air. Beneath the plaque inscribed with the words "Upright and Honest," Siti Yao sat solemnly in the high hall. His crimson official robe looked particularly imposing in the dimly lit room. Outside the hall, not only were the streets crowded with commoners who had come to gawk upon hearing the news, but several censors from the censorate were also hidden behind a screen, listening in. This earth-shattering scandal, sparked by a few public notices, had already become the biggest talking point in the entire capital that day. Mighty! The constables slammed their water and fire staffs hard against the ground, producing a heart-stopping, muffled thud. "Who is that in the gallery? State your name." Sitiao struck the gavel, his voice sounding like shards of jade striking ice, sending a chill through the room. Liang Shuyuan knelt at the foot of the hall. Though he had tidied his clothes slightly on the way there, his hair was still somewhat disheveled. After being buffeted by the cold wind along the way, his initial panic had subsided, replaced by the sophistry and composure typical of a scholar official. He straightened his back, bowed deeply, and when he looked up again, his eyes were brimming with tears of humiliation. This humble official, Liang Shuyuan, compiler of the Hanlin Academy, pays his respects to Lord Situ. Today's events are truly a tragedy for my family. It was my misfortune to marry such a malicious and jealous woman, and it is she who has brought this catastrophic disaster upon us. I stood to the side and did not kneel. According to the laws of the Daong dynasty, the legitimate daughter of a marquis who holds a title is not required to bow before an official until she has been convicted. I watched his tearful, emotional performance with a cold gaze, feeling nothing in my heart. "Your Excellency, please hear me out." Liang Shuyuan suddenly pointed at me, speaking with righteous indignation. "My late elder brother passed away prematurely, leaving my sister-in-law, Lady Yao, alone and helpless. Out of gratitude for my late brother's love and devotion, she vowed to remain chaste, has eaten only vegetarian food for years, and has never even set foot outside the front gate. Last night, she was struck by an excruciating pain from a chronic ailment. As her younger brother-in-law, how could I stand by and watch my elder sister-in-law die of pain right before my eyes? That is why I had no choice but to neglect my new bride." At this point, he pounded his chest in anguish. Who could have known that Lady Xue, arrogant and tyrannical as she is, would harbor such jealousy upon seeing this humble official depart, going so far as to fabricate such scandalous proclamations and post them all over the city? This not only ruins this humble official's career, but is also driving a virtuous and loyal wife to her death. I beg your honor to investigate this matter with the utmost scrutiny and clear the names of this humble official and my sister-in-law." What a silver tongue! Twisting the truth on its head, came a suppressed murmur from behind the screen, spoken by a certain imperial censor. No sooner had Liang Shuyuan finished speaking than Yao Yulian, who was kneeling beside him, acted with perfect understanding. She abruptly shook off the maid's support, tears streaming down her face, and cowed out repeatedly to Situ Yao. Blood soon began to seep from her forehead. "My reputation as a widow has been ruined. I have no face to continue living in this world. If my death can prove the Liang family's innocence, I will go straight to the underworld to ask my late husband for forgiveness." With that, she actually gritted her teeth and made as if to charge straight at the coiled dragon pillar in the hall. "Stop him." Situ Yao didn't even bat an eyelid as he coldly uttered those two words. The two constables acted with lightning speed. As their water and fire batons crossed, they pinned Yao Yulian firmly in place. She had no choice but to collapse to the ground, weeping pitifully, a truly pitiable sight. This ruse, portraying the brothers as harmonious and respectful and the sister-in-law as chaste and virtuous, was nothing short of ingenious. Had it been any ordinary woman facing such moral blackmail, in which death was used to prove one's resolve, she would likely have been completely flustered and unable to defend herself. But I'm not. I took a step forward, and the hem of my skirt traced a sharp arc through the air. With those words, Magistrate Liang has certainly cleared himself of any blame. A cold smile curled at the corner of my mouth, and my clear voice carried throughout the courtroom as every word rang out. "Since your honor insists that you went to check on my sister-in-law last night because her angina had flared up, there is one thing I do not understand." I turned around and looked straight at Yao Yulian, who was feigning death on the ground. My elder sister-in-law was in such excruciating pain last night that even the groom had to rush to her bedside in the middle of the night to tend to her. Surely her condition must be extremely critical. But why didn't a single person in the Liang household go to fetch a doctor? If her condition is allowed to worsen, won't Magistrate Liang's filial devotion, his belief that an elder sister-in-law is like a mother, turn out to be a poison that hastens her death? Liang Shiyuan's expression shifted slightly, and he forced himself to remain calm as he said, "It's late at night, and it's hard to find a doctor. Besides, this is just my sister-in-law's old ailment. She'll be fine after resting for a while. Since it's a chronic condition, we must not be careless." I immediately interrupted him, turned to look at Situ Yao on the high dais, and declared with conviction, "Minister Situ, the Ministry of Justice relies on evidence to adjudicate cases. How can we base our judgment solely on one-sided testimony? Since His Majesty has ordered you to thoroughly investigate this case, I humbly request that you summon the imperial physician right here in court to take Lady Yao's pulse. If Lady Yao truly suffers from a long-standing condition of angina, I am willing to accept the charge of jealousy and false accusation. Not only will I leave my husband's household with nothing, but I am also willing to bear a bundle of thorns and beg for forgiveness at the gates of the Ministry of Justice." As soon as those words were spoken, the entire hall was taken aback. No one would have thought I'd dare to make such a solemn vow. Liang Shiyuan's face turned pale in an instant, and a fine sheen of cold sweat immediately broke out on his forehead. Yao Yulian was struck as if by lightning. She jerked her head up, and her eyes, which had previously looked so pitiful, were now filled with undisguised terror. In my past life, it wasn't until that bowl of poison was forced down my throat that I realized Yao Yulian's sudden illness on her wedding night was merely a pretext. She was pregnant and had used our secret meeting to discuss how to have the child adopted under my name. Judging by the timing, the bastard in her womb was exactly less than 2 months old at that moment. "No! I won't see a doctor." Yao Yulian struggled frantically and shrieked, "I'm already cured. This is the hall of the Ministry of Justice, a place of great importance. How can they just let a woman from outside the court appear in public here to have her pulse taken and be examined? That's against the rules. Erling, please speak up for me." The more she resisted, the colder the look in Situ Yao's eyes became. "I make the rules here at the Supreme Court," said Situ Yao as he picked up a slip of paper and tossed it casually onto the floor of the courtroom. "Summon the imperial physician." In less than the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, Zhang, the senior-most and most renowned deputy director of the Imperial Medical Academy, arrived in a hurry, carrying his medical bag. "Judge Zhang, please take the time to examine this Ms. Yao thoroughly and determine just how severe her chronic angina really is." Situ Yao's voice was deep and carried an air of authority that brooked no resistance. Judge Zhang stepped forward immediately. The court officers forcibly held down Yao Yulian, who was struggling violently, and tied a silk handkerchief around her wrist. A deathly silence hung over the courtroom, broken only by Yao Yulian's heavy breathing and the slight trembling of Liang Shiyuan's shirt tail. After a moment, Judge Zhang withdrew his hand, his brow furrowed, and gave Yao Yulian another careful once-over before turning to report to Situ Yao with a bow. "I report to Minister Situ that this lady's pulse is smooth and flowing, like pearls rolling on a plate. Although there are some signs of stagnation in her qi and blood, she certainly does not suffer from any chronic conditions such as angina." Upon hearing this, Liang Shiyuan was just about to breathe a sigh of relief and offer an explanation when Judge Zhang dropped another bombshell. "Not only is she not ill, but the pulse this lady exhibits is a slippery pulse. Based on this humble servant's many years of medical experience, the lady is nearly 2 months pregnant." Boom! The commoners listening outside the courtroom instantly erupted into an uproar, and the censors behind the screen let out incredulous gasps. "What? You're pregnant? Isn't she a widow who's remained chaste for many years? Where did this bastard come from?" Heaven above, the newly crowned third-place scholar really did have an affair with my late sister-in-law, and even caused a death. That offhand remark, like a death warrant, completely shattered the facade that Liang Shiyuan and Yao Yulian had painstakingly constructed. Yao Yulian's eyes rolled back, and this time she really did collapse to the ground, her face ashen. Liang Shiyuan's knees buckled, and he fell heavily onto the blue stone slabs with a thud. His lips quivered as he tried to speak, but it was as if his throat were stuffed with bitter yellow gentian. Not a single word came out. I looked down from above at this couple, who looked as wretched as a pair of mud-soaked figures, my voice as cold as ice. After years of widowhood, living in seclusion and rarely venturing out, she was somehow able to diagnose a 2-month pregnancy out of thin air? Magistrate Liang, is this the virtuous and chaste sister-in-law you speak of, the one who is pure and blameless and has sworn to uphold her chastity? Sitiao picked up the gavel and slammed it down hard, causing dust to swirl down from the ceiling. Liang Shuyuan, do you have anything else to say? Your Honor. I'm innocent. I really had no idea. Liang Shuyuan suddenly sat up straight, his forehead streaked with blood from the bruise, mingling with cold sweat as it trickled down his face, his expression contorted with rage. As if he'd grabbed hold of a last lifeline amid raging waves, he abruptly pointed at Yao Yulian, who lay limp on the ground, and screamed hoarsely, "It's her. It must be this shameless woman who has been unfaithful, consorting with a stranger outside the marriage and conceiving a bastard child. I merely took pity on my brother and sister-in-law's hardships and looked after them from time to time. I never imagined she would commit such a scandalous act. Your Honor, I, too, have been deceived by her." Erlang. You'd actually do this to me? Yao Yulian looked up in disbelief, her face as pale as a corpse. She stared at the man standing before her, the same man who had been so tender and considerate toward her just yesterday, who had sworn to protect her for the rest of her life, yet now he was pinning all the blame on her alone. The despair in her eyes instantly turned to venomous hatred. Magistrate Liang's ability to shirk responsibility is as swift as ever, I said, bowing slightly to Sitiao on the high dais. My expression was calm, yet my voice carried clearly to everyone in the hall. However, Magistrate Liang seems to have forgotten something. My elder sister-in-law rarely leaves the house. She has never even stepped outside the Liang family gates. Her only social engagement is burning incense at the Great Xianghua Temple on the 1st and 15th days of each lunar month. And it seems that you, my husband, are the one who accompanies her to the temple every time, isn't that so? I turned to one side and looked at Liang Shuyuan's deathly pale face. Besides, the expenses for my elder sister-in-law's courtyard have always been handled personally by Magistrate Liang. Banksia, bring the items forward. Banksia immediately stepped forward, pulled a stack of slightly yellowed, washed-out receipts from her bosom, and held them high above her head. Your Honor, these are the prescriptions from a pharmacy that this servant discovered this morning while auditing the accounts at the western warehouse of the Liang residence, Banksia said loudly. Ever since 2 months ago, Mo Zhu, Magistrate Liang's personal attendant, has been frequently visiting the Jian Hall in the capital to pick up medicine. The herbs listed on this prescription are all used to stabilize and protect a woman's pregnancy. And the ledger clearly states that the First Lady authorized these expenditures. If Magistrate Liang truly knew nothing about this, why would he use his own private funds to cover up these pregnancy protection expenses for his eldest brother's wife? That's not all. As Si Tuyao raised his hand, a trembling apothecary and Liang Shuyuan's personal attendant, Mo Zhu, were escorted in from a side door at the side of the hall by court officers. This humble subject. I am the proprietor of Jian Hall. I humbly bow before your honor. The shopkeeper knelt with a thud and said in a trembling voice, "This young man, Mo Zhu, does indeed frequently visit my shop to purchase pregnancy-supporting medicine. Since he always asks for the finest bird's nest and herbs to safeguard the pregnancy, I remember him very well. Moreover, every single time, Magistrate Liang personally signed the bill, saying it was for the lady of the household. I originally thought the new lady was pregnant, but I never imagined." You're lying. You insolent commoner, how dare you slander an imperial official? Liang Shuyuan tried frantically to rush forward, but was held down firmly by the constables on either side. The evidence is irrefutable. You cannot deny it. Siti Yao's expression remained unchanged. He didn't even bother to show Liang Shuyuan the slightest hint of contempt. He reached out, pulled out a specially made black slip with red lettering, and slammed it down on the desk. Liang Shuyuan, a compiler at the Hanlin Academy, has committed acts of moral depravity. He divorced his first wife to marry another and committed adultery with his late elder brother's widow, causing her to become pregnant. These actions violate public morals and disregard the principles of familial propriety. In accordance with the Daong Code, Sitiao's voice suddenly rose, radiating the uncompromising authority of legalism. Liang Shuyuan and Ms. Yao are found guilty of adultery. Effective immediately, Liang Shuyuan is stripped of his position as compiler in the Hanlin Academy and shall never be reinstated. The Supreme Court of Justice is hereby ordered to notify the Ministry of Personnel to have him paraded through the streets as a public spectacle, to serve as a warning to others. As for the Xue family, Sitiao's gaze slowly shifted to me, and a barely perceptible flicker of approval passed through his eyes. Liang Shuyuan committed adultery and kept a mistress beforehand, and then abandoned his wife on their wedding night, acts that constitute grounds for irrevocable severance of marital ties. I hereby rule that Xue and Liang Shuyuan shall be divorced immediately. She is not required to return to her parents' home and may claim her entire dowry today. The Liang family shall not interfere. The two characters each Ju carry the weight of 1,000 Jun. Under the laws of Daong, divorce is already no easy matter, but having the authorities rule that the marital bond is severed is the most complete punishment and rejection for the husband. This means that, in this marriage, Liang Shuyuan is unquestionably the guilty party, while I, Xue Lingwei, not only retain my honor and reputation intact but can also, under the protection of the law, walk away with my head held high and unscathed. No. I can't divorce her. My future. My official position. Upon hearing the words never to be reinstated, Liang Shuyuan felt as if all the strength had been drained from his body. He slumped limply to the ground, muttering to himself. He had studied diligently for more than a decade, and upon winning the third-place honor in the imperial examinations, he had believed he could ride the coattails of the Marquis of Zhenyuan's household to soar to the heights of power. Yet, in the blink of an eye, all his wealth and glory had vanished like a mirage, shattered completely. "Thank you, Your Honor, the honest magistrate." Seeing this, my father slapped his thigh and burst out laughing. His face, weathered by years on the battlefield, was filled with the exhilaration of vindication. Pointing at Liang Shuyuan on the ground, he spat, "You lowlife, do you really think you're worthy of coveting my Xue family's daughter or our wealth? Guards! Bring the soldiers, follow me to the Liang mansion to seize the dowry. Not a single scrap of cloth or a single coin is to be left for this rabble." Yes! The Ho family's personal guards responded loudly, their voices echoing through the main hall. I stood in the center of the courtroom, watching as Liang Shuyuan and Yao Yulian were roughly dragged away by the bailiffs. In the glances they exchanged, there was no longer any trace of the scheming or tenderness they once shared, only endless regret and mutual resentment remained. Liang Shuyuan, this is only the beginning. Without the prestige of passing the imperial examinations and without the financial backing of my Xue family, your bedridden mother, your vain younger sister, and your eldest sister-in-law, who is carrying a bastard child and has ruined her reputation, will cling to you like leeches, draining every last drop of blood from your body, inch by inch. Miss Xue, wait a moment. Just as I was about to leave the courtroom, I heard Sitiao's voice behind me. I stopped in my tracks and turned around. By then, most of the court officials and onlookers in the hall had already dispersed, and my father was in a hurry to lead his men to the Liang residence to confiscate my dowry. In the empty hall, only the two of us remained. Sitiao stepped down from behind the desk, the hem of his crimson official robe swaying slightly with each step. He came to a stop 3 steps away from me, and for the first time, my clear outline was reflected in his deep, dark eyes. In today's events, Miss Xue's moves were all intricately linked, leaving Liang Shuyuan completely defenseless. His voice was very low, yet carried a faint, almost imperceptible note of scrutiny. Not only did she skillfully manipulate public opinion to force this official to convene a court session, but she had also long since arranged for the imperial physician and the witnesses from the pharmacy to testify in her favor. Such sharp wit does not seem befitting of a military family's daughter raised in seclusion. I met his gaze and smiled calmly and confidently. If it weren't for my decisive actions, it would be me, Xue Lingwei, who would have been drowned in a storm of insults and cast out of this courtroom today. Magistrate Situ, with your divine judgment, surely knows that in this world, a woman must be far more cunning than a man if she is to survive. Half a day later. Carry them out. Not a single box left behind, take them all. Boxes made of camphor wood, painted a fiery red, were carried out one by one through the gates of the Liang residence amid the coarse shouts of the Ho family's personal guards. The Liang family's small courtyard, once adorned with lanterns and festive decorations and brimming with joy, was now desolate, strewn with red silk trampled to shreds by military boots, a scene of utter chaos, resembling the ruins of a confiscated estate. I stood in the middle of the courtyard, coldly watching the Liang family's servants, who were usually so arrogant and haughty, now cowering in a corner like stray dogs, shivering with fear. Xue Lingwei! You thief! You can't take my gold-threaded 8-treasure beaded hairpin, it's a birthday gift from my brother. Liang Shuyuan's younger sister, Liang Shuyu, rushed out of the side room as if she had lost her mind, clutching her rosewood dowry chest so tightly that she refused to let go. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair was disheveled, and she had lost every trace of the haughty dignity she usually boasted as the daughter of a government official. I walked slowly toward her and looked down at her from above. In her past life, she used my dowry and wore the finest shoe brocade, yet she laced my medicine with sand and sneered that I was a crude military daughter fit only to bear children for the Liang family. Your birthday present? I looked at her impassively, my voice devoid of any warmth. Banksia read the ledger to her. Banksia stepped forward and read aloud. In the 3rd month of the 5th year of the Xuande era, Liang Shuyuan withdrew one gold-threaded, 8-treasure, beaded hairpin from the treasure pavilion, valued at 120 taels of silver, which was recorded in the Xue family shop's accounts. Liang Shuyu, the gift your brother so generously bestowed upon you with our Xue family's silver, since we are now parting ways, if you can return that silver on the spot, you may keep the hairpin. I don't have any silver. Liang Shuyu's face went pale, and her fingers suddenly relaxed. I kicked the dowry chest aside. The wooden box rolled away, and the pearls and jade inside scattered across the floor, reflecting a cold glow. If you don't have any money, get lost. My voice suddenly turned cold. Xue. Are you really not afraid of being struck by lightning for wiping out everyone like this? A hoarse, menacing voice, like the cawing of an old crow, suddenly rang out from the main hall. The Liang family's maids hurriedly stepped aside, revealing a wheelchair being pushed by a lowly maid. Seated in the wheelchair was a withered, gaunt old woman, blind, with sunken eye sockets, who was clutching a string of jet-black prayer beads tightly in her hand. Liang Shuyuan's blind mother, Mrs. Liang Zhang, who was bedridden. My lady, I hope you've been well. I looked at her, a cold smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Pa. You venomous woman. Though Mrs. Liang Zhang couldn't see me, she spat accurately in my direction. Her withered lips trembled violently, and her well-maintained face was now contorted like the bark of an old tree. Erlang is the star of literature from the heavens. That he would marry you is a blessing your Xue family has earned through 8 lifetimes of good deeds. You're nothing but a coarse, lowly daughter of a military family, unfit for public view, yet you dare to cause my son to lose his official post and bring an end to the Liang family line. You can't bear a son, so are you forbidding Erlang from producing an heir? You've violated the 7 grounds for divorce. This is an offense against heaven. Every word she spoke was laced with anguish. She turned the so-called 3 obediences and 4 virtues and filial piety into the most venomous weapons, attempting to crucify me in the court of public opinion and destroy my reputation. A few murmurs could be heard faintly among the neighbors who had gathered to watch. In the Daong dynasty, a woman who was unfilial or disobedient to her in-laws was bound to be the subject of criticism. Divine justice? I took 3 steps forward and stopped in front of Mrs. Liang Zhang's wheelchair. I bent down slightly and, in a voice only the 2 of us could hear, whispered word by word into her ear. Madam, have you forgotten that the Court of Supreme Justice ruled that the marriage was legally dissolved? Liang Zhang's body suddenly stiffened, and the prayer beads in her hand came to an abrupt halt. I straightened up and spoke in a clear, resonant voice, ensuring that everyone present could hear me perfectly. According to the laws of Daong, complete severance of ties means that a husband and wife have severed all bonds of affection and regard each other as mortal enemies. Since Liang Shuyuan committed adultery and violated moral norms, according to the law, I have no further connection whatsoever with your Liang family. The old lady is now nothing more to me than a stranger on the street. The filial disobedience and insubordination you speak of are nothing but a joke in the eyes of the Dayong law. You, Mrs. Liang Zhang was so furious she was shaking all over. Her withered fingers trembled as she pointed at me. As for what you called cutting off the family line, I said, a hint of mockery flashing in my eyes, the bastard child in my elder sister-in-law Yao's womb has now been imprisoned along with her in the Ministry of Justice. Liang Shuyuan, for divorcing his wife and committing incest, is to be exiled 3,000 li according to the law. I wonder if the old lady, with her decrepit old bones, will even live to see the day she holds a grandchild? Exile 3,000 li? Ms. Liang Zhang felt as if she had been struck a heavy blow. Her entire body suddenly went limp in her wheelchair. Xue, I'll fight you to the death. Ms. Liang Zhang, drawing on some unknown source of strength, suddenly lunged out of her wheelchair. Her fingernails were sharp, and she charged straight at my face with a vicious force, trying to scratch my face to shreds. However, before she could even touch the hem of my shirt, an agile figure had already stepped in front of me. My father kicked Liang Zhangshi back into her wheelchair. His hand pressed against the sword at his waist, his tiger-like eyes wide open, and his entire body radiated the overwhelming killing intent of a battle-hardened veteran. You old hag. You dare lay a hand on my daughter right in front of me? Do you think the blade in my hand hasn't seen blood? Ms. Liang Zhang was knocked senseless by the fall. She huddled in her wheelchair, whimpering, and didn't dare move a muscle. My daughter, we've finished taking inventory of the trousseau. Setting aside the damaged items, the Liang family still owes our Xue family 3,000 taels of silver. My father turned to look at me, his eyes filled with concern. What should we do about this? I looked at the dilapidated Liang residence, at Mrs. Liang Zhang, who was slumped on the ground, and at Liang Shuyu, who was trembling beside her, her eyes filled with despair. According to the Dayong Code, following a divorce, if the husband is unable to repay the damages to the bride's dowry, his family's assets may be used to settle the debt. I spoke coldly, my voice devoid of any compassion. Guards, seize the Liang family's house deeds and land deeds to offset the debt. As for the rest of the Liang family, I pointed at the main gate, anyone who doesn't move out within 1 hour will be beaten out with sticks. Xue Lingwei. You can't do this. This is our home. Liang Shuyu cried out in a piercing wail. Your home? I sneered. Every brick and every tile in this house was paid for with money from my Xue family. Now that we've divorced, you have no right to live here. I turned around, never glancing back at that bunch of ants, and strode out through the gates of the Liang residence. Outside the gate, the sun was shining brightly on Vermilion Bird Street. A discreet yet luxurious carriage was quietly parked on the street corner. The curtain of the carriage lifted slightly, revealing a handsome yet icy profile. Situ Yao, the minister of the Supreme Court, sat inside the carriage, holding a cup of tea. His gaze swept indifferently through the crowd and settled on me. When he saw me looking at him, he gave a slight nod. I stepped forward and, from across the carriage, curtsied properly. Here in this courtroom today, I would like to thank Lord Situ for upholding justice. Situ Yao set down his teacup, his voice deep and resonant, like the clink of jade. I am merely carrying out the law. Miss Xue is both intelligent and resourceful. Even without me, the Liang family would not have fared well today. You flatter me, Your Honor. Were it not for the Dali Temple's unwavering integrity, no matter how resourceful I might be, I could never have overcome the prejudices of this world. I looked up, met his gaze, and smiled gently. After this ordeal, I have come to realize that justice in this world may be slow in coming, but it never fails to arrive. Situ Yao gazed at me quietly. After a moment, the corners of his mouth curled up ever so slightly, and it seemed as though a spring breeze had brushed across his face, which was usually as cold as an ice mountain. Miss Xue, as you set out on this journey, the world lies wide open before you. Please take good care of yourself. I'll take your kind words to heart. The carriage began to move slowly, its wheels making a crisp sound as they rolled along the bluestone pavement. I stood in the warm sunshine on Suzaku Street, watching the carriage gradually disappear into the distance. The wind lifted the hem of my robe, making it flutter. The sky is vast and the earth stretches far and wide. I feel the infinity of the universe. My splendid life, Xue Lingwei's, has only just begun. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.